Good evening, everyone. It's actually delightful to see so many of you here. Welcome to you all. And a particular warm welcome to President Barroso and to João de Almeida, and I'll talk about him in a moment. Now, it's traditional on these sorts of events to give a very lengthy and warm introduction to our speakers, but I'm not going to do it because you know who they are, which is why you're here in the first place, and you know they're immensely distinguished. Now, for President Barroso, obviously, he started his political life, most importantly, as a professor of law, or as an assistant professor of law, which is where most good people start. He accidentally became Prime Minister of Portugal, and then when he got fed up doing that, after quite a short period of time, went off to become President of the European Commission, did 2 terms, was the second after Jacques Delors, who had done 2 terms, and might ask you about one of your successors, is obviously hoping for a second term in a moment. So, the important man, and now Goldman Sachs, and when he's not doing that, he's doing the Global Alliance on Vaccines, which is really important too in the light of what we've seen over the last few years. So his right is what I hope I can call my friend and colleague, João de Almeida. Now, João has done many important jobs, but his most important job has been as a visiting fellow at Trinity for his last terms, and this term he's slumming it at Peterhouse. But when he's not been doing that,
one is perfect.
when he's not been doing that, he has been an EU ambassador to the UN and to the US. He tells me, I'm allowed to say this, that he's seen Nikki Haley putting her bins out because they shared the same building for a period of time. And then when he moved from there to become the first EU ambassador to the UK, of course, he wasn't an ambassador at the beginning because Boris Johnson, in his wisdom, thought that he wasn't important enough to be an ambassador, but fortunately sense prevailed. And so he has lived through Brexit. And the way we're going to do things this evening is that I'll ask a couple of questions to President Barroso. João will ask informed questions to President Barroso, and then we will move on, take some questions from the floor, and we'll be finished in about an hour's time, so you've got time to get some dinner. So I'm going to sit down rather than sort of bellow from here, but I want to start with actually a rather big and indeed rather scary question, in fact, because I spent the weekend in Warsaw, and what struck me more, I've been going to Warsaw for a very long time, what struck me this year more than anything else is the fear, the real fear about what's happening in the world. I would like to just give you a very general question to start to ask you, are you frightened? And if so, can anything be done?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your extremely kind words, Professor Barroso. It is a great pleasure to be here at Trinity College, that Faculty of Law of Cambridge University. I visited last time for the Alkin lecture when I was President of the Commission, but as people say, criminal power returns to the place of the crime. To that. Anxious and nervous I am, and I'm concerned with the current situation, probably because of the main practice. I will not say I'm frightened. We try to avoid the word frightened. But in fact, this world today, if you take some kind of perspective, is certainly more polarized, more fragmented, more unpredictable, and more dangerous. No doubts about it, when you compare with situations before. And there are some reasons for that. In fact, some trends we have seen already for some time, including the pandemic, and even before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, with increased rivalry between the United States and China. But the pandemic has accelerated some developments in terms of supply chains, the more fragmented, the beginning of some decoupling that is happening, in fact. Some people call it de-risking, but in fact it's decoupling. There is a reason for that being decoupling. It's because of science and technology at the heart of it, because science and technology most of those technologies are dual-use technologies. They are also technologies for war. And that's what we are seeing now, is preparing for war. technology being part of that preparation for war. If you look at statistically, empirically, it's the biggest ever expenditure of good weapons. The most sophisticated weapons. So, assuming that economically not all actors are rational, they are investing for some reason in weapons, including, by the way, development of more sophisticated weapons, including, by the way, the concerns with the nuclear. And we have some trends, these that I believe are new compared with what we had in the so-called Cold War, those moments after the Cold War. It is the fact that we are seeing at the same time this polarization between countries, conflicts, but within countries. Our societies, namely the democratic societies, were not in my lifetime, I cannot remember, as polarized as they are today. From the United States to what happened recently in Europe, many countries in Europe, from Spain to the Netherlands, Turkey, Brazil, Australia. So democracies that are, as they never were, so polarized. And so what is interesting, and frightening if you want to use that active or that word, is that one thing reinforces the other. For instance, the refugees and illegal migration has been one of the leitmotifs for the rise of the far right. And we have one of the countries that has the biggest tradition of liberalism in the classic sense, more liberal country in the world, like the Netherlands, where a far-right xenophobic party wins the election. As it was that. So this is a complete new development. And we can quote many other cases. So this is reinforced. There is another element that I believe is important for us, namely here in Europe, is that a common pattern is what I call the mobilization of resentment. So, namely after Russia invasion of Ukraine, I believe that is the decisive moment. The world is no longer the same and will never be the same after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. This is not simply a European issue, as some friends I have in India or in other parts of the world that say, oh, you Europeans are always bringing your problems to the rest of the world. Why are you saying that? The fact is that it's a global issue. We can see why, for the impact it has from food security to energy security to issues that are already developing in that region, in Africa. For one mistake that President Obama, a very intelligent man, I have the pleasure of meeting him in many meetings, bilateral, G8 and G20, but he made a very big mistake among others when he said that Russia was a regional power. Russia is not a regional power. Russia is the biggest country in the planet, in geographical terms, and it cannot be considered a regional power. Even if it was a regional power, we should not call it a regional power. All forms of arrogance are forms of stupidity. And we should avoid any form of arrogance when we deal with these matters. So this is why I believe we are going to see that deepening. So we are seeing a deepening, a widening, and an acceleration. That's something. Time is also important. We are in one of those situations in history where we see history seems accelerated. For us, what happened recently? Who could have thought that Finland and Sweden were going to join NATO? I mean, it would be impossible 3 years ago. I mean, February 2022, it would be impossible to admit Finland, or almost impossible, and Sweden in NATO, or Denmark join the European defense mechanism again. So we are seeing a lot of developments that are showing this trend for more polarization, and the trigger was the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I believe this is going to be accelerated now very much for the conflict in the Middle East, the war, Israel-Gaza, or Israel-Hamas, or Israel-Palestine war. This is another factor of reinforcing the resentment of the so-called global South against the so-called global North, means Europe and the United States, basically. And I just came from African Union Summit in Addis last week. It was amazing to see some leaders that we considered moderate, including, by the way, President Lula from Brazil, who was the guest of honor, someone I know for many years. And in fact, now, those who were speaking besides the host of the conference, were, in fact, Prime Minister of Palestine and the Secretary General of Arab League. And you can imagine what was discourse. So this is coming more and more, as something where the West is in the defensive. The perception in China was I met some time ago the Prime Minister of China, premiers, they said, the came and also met several members of the government. And it's quite interesting to speak, and now I'm no longer in politics, so I think now they speak with me with more sincerity. And also, since I left politics, my level of sincerity is increasing day by day. I can speak completely. I'm representing no one except me, which is, of course, rather weak but position, but that's what I represent now. I'm not representing any institution. And in fact, in China, their perception is that the West, namely the United States, we are in an irreversible decline. Not only economical, in terms of the share of the GDP and trade globally, but in the general decline from a cultural point of view, from a political and diplomatic point of view. This is a perception in China, at least at elite level, quite clearly, but it's not very different in New Delhi or in Ankara or in Pretoria or maybe also in Brasilia. That's not to say. And this is something that puts us in a difficult situation because the West, Europe, and the United are accused of double standards. And in fact, we appear with less, let's say, commitment to our own values and to our own principles. And so this is why I think I'm not surprised that you felt that in Poland being, of course, in the front line with Russia, that is indeed a very dangerous power today. Sorry, it was a little bit long, but I wanted just to give where I see things in general so that we can now go deeper, if you want, on some of these points.
So following that up, given that you've said that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was the trigger, the question then is the EU doing enough? What more should the EU be doing in respect of Ukraine?
The EU has been remarkably united, of course, with always the exception of Mr. Orban, that it's typical also, and it's not bad to show that, in fact, we are unity, that our motto is unity in diversity, so no one is obliged to follow exactly the same line. That's why we are European Union, we are not the Soviet Union, we are European Union. So there is a lot of diversity inside the Union that has 27 countries, but remarkably, the European Union has been basically on the same page, committing, taken together, if you take everything together, so financially, humanitarian aid, receiving refugees, and also in European is probably the first donor to Ukraine, ahead of the United States. That's not what the statistics in the media usually appear because they put it by country. And so the United States by country is certainly number one. But find way, Germany is the number two. Germany is number two. People don't have that idea. But certainly Germany is number two in terms of financial support to Ukraine. But if you take together the European Union, all aspects is the number one in terms of support to Ukraine. If you take the humanitarian aid, the financial aid, also the military aid, and all the other forms of aid that the European Union is committing. But of course it should do more. But in European Union, by definition, I'd say it's slow. It's incremental. It's adapting. It's more reactive than proactive. That's the way the European Union is. You mentioned, Professor, that I was leading the European Union Commission 10 years, and I could tell many stories about that, how difficult it is from the idea that comes when you take an initiative, the Commission takes an initiative for a regulation, for a directive, or even for a communication, non-binding, so-called soft law, and how long it takes. It can take 5-6 years. So if you compare this pattern with what the European Union is doing now towards Ukraine, it's remarkable. How quickly the European Union is able to take some decisions. But this is not sufficient. Not only Europe, but the others. I mean, European Union, okay, we have to do more. Inside the European Union, there are quite different, important differences. And also the United States, there is a big doubt about knowing how long are the United States going to be committed, because the reality is that we need the United States for that. And one of the interesting developments now is that we are trying, people in Europe, I say we, but I'm no longer in any position in the European Union, but because I remain a very committed European, that's why I continue to say we. But I think that today, the feeling I have is that in Europe, people are trying to think, what if we cannot rely for longer on the United States? On all aspects. That's a very important deal.
Which actually brings me very neatly to my next question, which is, what if there's a Trump presidency?
Exactly. That is the concern that I just came from Brussels this Friday and Thursday, and that was, and I met many people there, and that is a concern. Because let's think about what happened before. For Trump, we already have some track record. One of his first most important decisions was to leave the Climate Convention of Paris. Because the United States is the only country in the world out of the Climate Convention. Iran was member, North Korea is member, Cuba, Venezuela. So the so-called rogue states were members of this multilateral system. The United States out. That's when Angela Merkel, by the way, a good friend of mine, someone who usually measures very cautiously every word she said, and that's remarkable for a German chancellor to say it, we cannot rely on others as we used to do. Maybe it is time for us, Europeans, to take our future in our own hands. That was when she said it, when Trump took that position. And afterwards, Trump had very nice words to Putin during his mandate and after the mandate to other dictators, autocratic leaders, but always very harsh remarks about Europeans. Not only about European institutions, but about the Chancellor of Germany or the President of France and others. So this, except Farage, I don't know any European politician that was really praised by President Trump. So this is, of course, a matter of concern. And now, if he is elected, of course, he'll be much more aggressive and probably some kind of terrorism, because, as you know, his position is that he won the election, but it was stolen from him. So this is a matter of concern, not only in Europe, but in other parts of the world. Of course, we have to think, and I should have said that I'm a committed European, but I'm an Atlanticist. I'm one of those persons who believe that we should work with our like-minded countries. The United States are one of the biggest democracies in the world. The United States is not just the president, the United States is a Congress, it's academia, it's the media, it's civil society, it's science, it's great business, and companies are some of the most innovative companies in the world. In fact, the United States continues to be the number one power from a technological and scientific point of view. So the United States is much more than the White House, but of course it's a matter of concern because the President of the United States has a lot of power and can do a lot of good things, but also a lot of bad things.
Good, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Catherine, for organizing and hosting, and any other colleagues that contributed to this. Thank you for coming. I have a disclaimer. We are friends, and I was his chief of staff, so we don't diverge that much. So it's not the idea for a clash here at the top table. And it was an honor to work with you for 5 years in your first mandate as president. I have a few concerns as a citizen. I don't represent anybody anymore like you, so I'm free, or freer than I was, let's say, as a diplomat. But I'm very worried by the Trump prospect. I was ambassador to the US. I traveled all around the country, and I know what Trump represents. It's more than himself. It's some deep trends in America, and this is not going to go away, even if he is not elected. So I'm worried about the US. As you said, I think we need to work with the US. And the other element where I think we should focus is new context, and I wanted to have your views on that. How much can we try to work better with the United Kingdom? And how much should we encourage our United Kingdom friends to work better with Europe? There is an election in Europe, but most likely there will be an election in the UK in the coming months. So how do you see in this new context where our countries and our values are being challenged, if not threatened, what does this mean for not only the transatlantic cooperation classic between the EU and NATO, but also one that involves most directly EU and UK in this new context?
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, because in fact I should have already said thank you, because the idea of myself coming to see you here all comes from Joel, such a great friend, and indeed someone I learned a lot of it because when I joined the European Union, the president of the Commission, he was one of the longest serving Portuguese civil servants in the Commission. In fact, he joined the Commission before Portugal joined. He was in the initial team, in the transition with the initial team of one of the porte-parole of Jacques Delors. And afterwards, he made a great career, including, by the way, in my office. Both stuff. So really great to be with João here today. And afterwards, he had that experience of being infected, an interesting experience of being ambassador in Washington, ambassador in New York, United Nations, and the first European Union ambassador in the UK. About UK, let me tell you very frankly, I'm sorry, because I know it's always difficult to say things about concrete countries, but we are in academia, so I'm free to express my opinion. I was extremely disappointed with Brexit. I'm one of those Europeans who is really Anglophile. I love this country, I respect this country, I admire this country. I think this country is, of the middle powers, one of the most influential, but let's put it clear, it's not in the first league. That's important to be honest about it. Where is power today? And I had the privilege, by the way, João was also with me in some of those meetings, to be in the G8. At the time, it was the G8 with Russia. Or to be in the G20, where global decisions are made. It's that table where decisions are made. Who runs? United States, China, and Europe to fit this together. All the other countries, with all respect, from Japan to India today, or UK today, are important. And some of them, like UK, that is this, it's where we have this language, English, that is today became the lingua franca, and it's also has a great diplomacy from my point of view, and a great know-how, great cosmopolitan view. But it does not have the leverage or the power. That's as simple as that. And dimension counts. There was a famous European politician who said once, in Europe, all countries are small. The problem is that some have not yet noticed it. But that's reality. Germany, that is the biggest European country in demographic and economic, not counting Russia, that's a specific case. In Western Europe, Germany is by far the biggest economic power and biggest demographic. It's very small. Compare with the United States, or compare with China, or compare even with India from a demographic point of view. And so we need the European dimension. And then I can give you my testimony. When I was in the European Union, I've been not only 10 years leading the Commission, but before as Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, I was 8 years in the Foreign Ministry. So I was in the Council, it's the European Union, as you know, and I hear many of you come from law, you know how the European Union works. It's not just the Commission. Of course, the Commission is important, but we have the Council that member states are. So I was, in fact, since the 80s in the Council of the European Union. And who are the most important players? Those who shaped the European Union, you know well as well. It was France, Germany, and UK. And UK had not less influence than France and Germany. Contrary to what I've listened here. On the contrary, I remember when we were on the table of the European Council, when Tony Blair was taking his initiatives, or even Gordon Brown, and even David Cameron, they were as influential, as sometimes more, as the German Chancellor or the President of France. The climate change package would not have been possible without British leadership. When we discuss anything from trade or a strategic relationship with the US or China or Russia, the United Kingdom was one of the most decisive, if not more, the most decisive voice around the table. Today, it cannot act. Today, it's alone. With great diplomacy, with intelligence, with connections, with special relationship. But you remember what people said that after Brexit there will be a free trade agreement with the United States? Where it is? Where it is that trade agreement after all these years? I've not seen it. And there was Trump, it was Biden, so different administrations. Because the UK now lacks that level. That's why we need to be together. So what I expect, first of all, people here in academia, but I think I can make that comment. I bet Labour will win next election. So that's why Europeans are preparing for that. And of course, what the new government will do is to try to adapt to a new scenario. I don't think it's realistic to wait, at least in the foreseeable future, for the UK to join the European Union. I don't think it's possible. From what I know from the United Kingdom, but I think it's possible to have a new kind of balanced and more, let's say, convergent and more, let's say, cooperative and productive and functional relationship. I believe it's possible, and it's designed for all the reasons we have mentioned before. If you look at outside world, those, for instance, those terrorist organizations that are looking at Europe, they don't make any distinction between the European Union or the UK, or Norway or Switzerland. They don't know if Norway or Switzerland are members of the European Union. It's Europe. It's Europe. And the UK is, quintessentially Europe. Whether the UK wants it or not, that's the way the UK is seen. So we need to be together and leverage the influence, the common values, the way we are. That basically we share the European Union and UK. And I believe that's in our interest. And I believe the developments, the global developments that you mentioned, are going to drive us closer. And then I believe that's the more likely evolution, and not only likely, but I think also desired from my point of view.
So would you say, if you were advising the incoming Labour government, that they should go for a big bazooka with a big offer, including something on security and defence, and something on mobility, and something on Erasmus, or steady she goes little by little?
I think there should be a kind of a reset of the relationship. But now, how it's going to happen, I think I prefer not to go in detail, because in fact I'm working a little bit on that, and I think it's better from a political point of view if the UK wants to take initiative, it should be the UK. It should not be a European politician or former politician to tell what the UK should be doing. So it's what I believe is that, let me be a little brutal. The advantage of being politics. Mm-hmm. In Europe, there was no respect for some prime minister of UK. And that's very hard to say. Because UK is a great democracy. It's probably the oldest parliamentary democracy in Europe or in the world. My friends in Finland, they say they are the first, because in fact, the election of women was there possible, and the vote of women was before, happened in Finland before UK. So from that point of view, it's truly democratic. We have other parliaments before the British. Anyhow, it's one of the oldest parliaments in the world. But these things count. And that's why I can give you my political testimony. When you are around the table, you're like in the G8, G7, almost 3 days. And it's a personal interaction. Be frank, with all respect. Berlusconi did not have the same influence that other prime ministers. And the contrary. Italy is the mother of our European civilization, or one of the most important sources of our civilization. Everything comes from Italy at the end of the day. Not everything, but most things come from Italy. Including, by the way, the Capitol. But that's another point. So you see, the prime minister. Now, with a government that is respected, I think there is a very good basis for Europeans, European Union as such, to have a good, fruitful, promising relationship in the UK, provided the UK also wants it, of course. And I'm sure, big part of the UK wants that, and there are conditions for that. Now, how to do it, that's more delicate, and on that matter, I would want to go. I don't know, Joe, if you want to go more in detail, because he was the ambassador here, so he knows much more about this than me.
So do you want to just comment, if you were now the ambassador to the UK, what would you be looking to do?
I think I'll be looking to encouraging the new government, whoever runs it.
That's typical diplomacy.
I would advise them to try to start a new cycle, as José Manuel Barroso said, a reset. I think we need that for obvious reasons, and some of them were mentioned already here today. And I think it's very important that we reestablish full trust. When I was ambassador here for 1,020 days, we reached the lowest possible levels of trust across the chair. And that's certainly, I'm certainly to blame. Maybe not, maybe not. I think things have improved, and I must pay tribute to Sunak's government. They've improved the relationship with Europe. I think Europe has made an effort. We covered a lot of ground with the Windsor framework, with the Horizon accession and all that. So there's progress has been made. But I think we need, and my advice would be open, invest in this relationship for all the reasons that have been mentioned, but also because it's good for our people. It's good for the generation represented here, who was maybe one of the biggest victims of Brexit in terms of, mobility, Erasmus, exchanges, and all that. So I think we owe it to this generation to make it different. May I just raise another point before you open the discussion, which is another tremendously important exogenous factor that is going to impact upon Europe and the UK and the US, and that is China. So I would like to have José Manuel Barroso's views on how should we deal with China. I see the US going in a direction which, regardless of who wins the election, is going to continue one of I wouldn't say confrontation, but a certain degree of aggressivity, and sometimes for good reasons, sometimes not so good reasons. But anyway, the US is in a different position than we are, much more dependent upon trade, economic terms with China than the US is. And Europe is always faced with this situation: should we totally follow the US, our natural friends? Should we have an alternative positioning regarding China? Or should we rather, share notes, compare notes, and have a common front with the US? Situation in Europe is different if you take one country or the other. So this is a very complex, maybe the most complex after Russia, of course, situation that we have to deal with. So your views on how to handle China in the EU?
That's not a friendly question.
I'll give you the chance to answer that, and then I'll turn to the floor to take some questions from the floor.
Okay, thank you. But about China, I've been dealing with China for many years because I was very young, foreign minister of Portugal. And in fact, it was during my time that we made the best steps for the handover of Macau to China. So Macau was handed back to China 3 years after Hong Kong in 1999, but negotiations, the critical were when I was foreign minister 95 till 95. Since then, the Chinese call me a friend of China, not because I am supporting, of course, the regime. I completely disagree with the regime, and I had very frank and robust discussions with them on some of these issues, but because it was loyal, firm, but these agreements are disagreements. And I think this is a very important point, because in relations between countries, it's not just what, is how. To insult China, I don't think it's wise. I mean, to break all the protocol, it's better to be kind than to be rude. And Chinese, they don't like to be insulted. I don't think any country likes. And sometimes in some comments I hear coming from the United States, I don't see that intelligence in terms of dealing with China. China thinks, and they have some good reasons to think, that they have been humiliated by some Western powers, not only Western, including Japan, for many times. And now that's their time. See? They think they have the right to become one of the very important power, and that the United States, every United States, do not want them to be. They make some kind of separation with Europe, and they try to divide Europe from the United States. I mentioned I was some time ago in Beijing, not only in Beijing, but I met the leadership there. I know Xi Jinping, met him before and after being in the commission. He was, in fact, the first president of the People's Republic of China to visit European institutions, to visit Brussels, the European Commission, and community institutions. And in fact, they believe that there is an attack not to let them assume their natural role. Now, of course, there is competition, and we have to be honest about it. There is competition, and from the United States to China and also Europe. But I don't think it's good to have this kind of full decoupling. That's why I think it was a good idea. The European Commission, it was the European Commission that starts speaking about de-risking. De-risking is, I think, the Chinese also don't like that expression, but they should accept it because even from a management perspective, from a management risk perspective, it's obvious that one country or one group of countries should not be too exposed to what happens in other parts of the world. And so when we have such a dominance of China in some areas, including trade and investment, it's rational and reasonable that, this is, that there is some hedging and that management of risk. First, Brazil. Brazil is becoming, and Brazil's people don't think a lot about Brazil, but Brazil is a very important country. And Brazil, in terms of trade, is becoming too much dependent on China. So it's only natural that they try to diversify. The same with Europe. So I think Europe should have, first of all, I think it is desirable that the United States and Europe come to a common agreement on China. Because until now, there is not that, as João said. And I think it makes sense that we have a common strategy, sometimes even with different roles, but it's possible to have a common strategy with different roles. Secondly, as also was mentioned, in Europe, the sentiment around European leaders is that we like to keep business open with China, also because Europe needs more foreign trade than the United States. We like to. But of course, we should be firm on issues where we disagree. Just to give an example that I know from my time at the Commission. In the 10 years, I had summits every year with China, so-called European Union Summit with China. There was not a single one when they did not ask us to give them market economy status. And we never gave them market economy status, remember that. But we're not insulting them. We're saying, with all respect, you do not fill the 5 criteria, technocratic criteria. That's the beauty of the European Commission, what I call the technical charisma of the European Commission. So these 5 criteria that define our market economy status. So we don't give you. And of course, there were the 2 issues that were difficult. One was arms embargo after Tiananmen, and this issue with arms embargo, they were not insisting, they understood that we could not. But the market economy status, they were putting pressure on the different countries. By the UK, at that time, was by far the biggest ally of China, putting less pressure on us, because the Golden Age, remember, the UK and some Nordic countries were putting a lot of pressure on me and on the European Commission for us not to launch anti-dumping investigations on solar panels, because at that time the UK was completely on the side of opening completely to China, which for us the Commission was obviously a mistake, because in that case our industry would have been gone already. So, but the Commission tried to keep a balanced position, saying we can do that, we cannot do that. One thing I don't like in our attitude towards China, in Europe and in the West in general, is sometimes putting the blame on others of what we cannot do, of what is our responsibility. I think the obstacle for our success in Europe, the only obstacle is between ourselves, and our success is ourselves. We don't do our homework. And when we don't do our homework, of course we cannot be surprised that others do better. As simple as that. So we have to do better. In some areas, we have to do better. And in some matters, the Chinese are doing better than we are. For instance, in terms of investment in the green area, they are doing much better than we are doing. And of course, there is dumping. I'm not naive. There is dumping. There is, of course, strong state support to the so-called state-owned enterprise and so on. There is a very protectionist attitude from China, but we have to put our act together. In that case, then afterwards, we can have a frank conversation. So I would say competition without naivety, but not to be unnecessarily aggressive, because that will put us in a difficult position also towards the world.
Thank you for that. I'm going to just take some questions. Could you just put your hand up if you'd like to ask any questions?